Hello everyone! Today I have a book for you about creepy crawlies. Wiggling worms at work. Down in the ground under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels. Rainwater trickles down. Roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. And that's one of the reasons why at Parker School, when we find worms in the fields, we love to put them in our garden, in our raised beds, so that they can help our plants to grow. Worms tunnel in hard-packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes into the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. That's part of the inside of the worm in the middle here. Worms do not have teeth. Muscles, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzards grind the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in soil, just as you digest a salad. What's left passes through the worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets, small pieces, called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruit and vegetables grow bigger and better. And sort of imagine if a worm was split in half, you could see maybe what was inside. Sometimes worms crawl above the ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too. Some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout. Worms help new plants begin to grow. Seems like worms are pretty helpful creatures, don't you think? Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves into knots because they have no backbones. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments. These segments act like the coils on a slinky toy. They let the worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act like little legs. They help a worm to move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil. The back end slinks up, making the worm short and fat. And that's kind of how they creep along when you see them above the ground. You can reach around and touch your backbone. That's that sort of hard, bumpy bit you can feel in the middle of your back. That's your backbone, and that's what worms do not have. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, with all its wiggling, twisting, and turning. It's a wonder a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, no nose, no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations in the ground and senses a hungry robin. Quickly, the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from enemies. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through the moist skin. In the hot sun, their skins dry up and they can't breathe. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria that worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp strands of spaghetti. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. That might be pronounced castings. I'm going to check and let you know. This pile of worm castings is called a midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow and acts like a door to keep out bad weather and rain. You can hunt for those around your home and in your backyard to see if you can find the entrance to a worm's burrow. In spring, before the weather warms, worms wiggle to surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both male and female, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm crawls back into its burrow. Okay, come over. Come sit with me while we finish the story. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head. Come join me. Forms near the head of each worm that has mated. I'm going to put the book in front of you so all my friends can see. Slowly, the worm begins to move backward. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body just as a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over openings in the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the opening and into a cocoon. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. And that's how we get more worms. In about 3 weeks, the eggs hatch. Out of about 30 eggs, only 3 or 4 wormlets emerge from each cocoon. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread, less than an inch long, but they are fully developed worms and live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them to their tunnels, and covering any leftovers with their castings. Castings? We'll find out. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. Now I know that a baby worm is called a wormlet. It's so small. These babies grow fast. In 6 weeks, they are adult worms. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until spring, and then they wiggle up, tunneling, twisting, and turning until they're right under your feet again. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. The end. Now I've just learned so much about worms. I hope you have too. If you have any questions, you can let me know at one of our meetings. Thanks for watching this book with me.